I have in my office a picture of Ray Arcel handling Benny Leonard. And on the bottom is a picture of Ray Arcel handling Roberto Duran, 60 years apart. Here's a man who trained the two greatest lightweights in the history of the ring.
Fight fans love a puncher. Fight fans love somebody who has that jungle intensity, the Dempsey, the Duran.
Duran was fighting a guy that I knew named Benny Huertas, who came from the Gramercy Gym on 14th Street. He was a good, very technical fighter. Duran destroyed him. And I said, holy God, look, who is this guy? And we soon found out he was the greatest lightweight of, maybe of the century.
Within the year, he's fighting Ken Buchanan, the lightweight championship. Buchanan's a cutie. Buchanan is a good technician. Didn't matter. Didn't matter. Duran took him apart. By the 13th round, a battered Buchanan had to spit out his mouthpiece many rounds earlier in order to breathe. And Duran just lets go with one right to the cojones. And Johnny LaBianco, the referee who hadn't seen anything, and low blow or anything, is just, you know, waving it off. Meanwhile, here's Buchanan in agony.
At 135 pounds, he was as good as it's ever been. He was, you know, and he just got better with every fight. He was a brilliant defensive fighter. People never think of him as that. But it was very hard to hit him. He could punch, he was tough.
If you ever saw Roberto Duran fight, you never forgot it. Because he was a different act. He was like a thunderstorm coming across the ring at you. I don't know of any other fighter who was quite that wild in the ring, and yet he was in control of himself as a boxer.
This was a man, is still the hero of the Latino boxing fan. Didn't matter, he's Panamanian, Mexican, and Puerto Rican. It's Roberto Duran.
As a lightweight, I think he was unbeatable as a lightweight. Although he had his greatest fight, oddly enough, as a welterweight. Won that first shot with Sugar Ray Leonard.
And so the first...
It was just amazing because it rained like crazy and people put the garbage bags on top of their head and oh, it was torrential. And then Duran walked out and it stopped raining and of course the fight was legendary.
There were several of us at ringside waiting for the fighters to come in the ring and Joe Frazier happened to be sitting with us. And Duran comes in and he's snarling and sneering and looking. And we said to Joe Frazier, Joe, who does that remind you of? Because Frazier was similar to that, not quite as wild, but similar. And Joe took the question very seriously, and he looked, and he's looking at Duran, and he goes on for like 30, 40 seconds, and finally he says, yeah, he reminds me of somebody, Charles Manson.
And Duran staring at Leonard.
He was Roberto Duran against the undefeated, ever popular Ray Leonard. Beats him from pillar to post. Second round drives him across the ring, gives him a whooping.
He came out like a man who was not going to lose, and you saw it in him. He was ferocious, he was clever. He almost bullied Sugar Ray Leonard, and he just had great glee in beating him.
Leonard, of course, was a pretty boy. And a lot of critics said, oh, when he's in a real tough fight, he'll fold. He's got no heart. He's too pretty. And Leonard went out that night to show the world that he could fight Duran on his terms. And it was an incredible 15 rounds. No knockdowns. I don't think there was any blood. But it was magnificent. And both men, the height of their skills, and they put on a tremendous fight.
He allowed Duran to dictate the moment. Because Duran knew you couldn't win a boxing match against Ray Leonard, but you could win a fight. Well, Leonard got sucked into that, and pretty soon it went from a boxing match to a fight. Yet even at that, if you watch it, it was a lot closer fight than people think. He lost, and it was a crushing blow to him. He couldn't conceive of such a thing.
So it's devastating for any undefeated fighter to kind of put things back in perspective, to get back to who he is and who he was, because he has to deal with losing. And very few fighters can come back from that loss, or that devastation.
What happened between then and the next fight is people are still arguing about what happened.
In the second fight, it was obvious to Leonard that if he was to try and fight Duran again on his terms, he could possibly lose again. Because when it came to the brawling, Duran was one of the best. So he decided to psych him out and use his speed and boxing skills. Leonard wouldn't stand and fight with him on that occasion. He was poking his tongue out at him, trying to humiliate him. I mean, no one's going to tell me that Duran's a coward. No one. I mean, he'd go through a brick wall. But he felt he was being humiliated by Leonard, and Leonard wasn't behaving like how a fighter should behave. And he got so frustrated, he just said, "No mas," turned around, walked away.
He was the object of a lot of scorn about that, and people felt that it was a fixed fight or whatever they felt, which was so ridiculous, because Duran had too much pride for that.
Something happened. And Duran's never explained it. Maybe he can't.
It was a way of thumbing his nose at society, at propriety, and, he just went, boom, I'm not going to play your game.
That night I said, well, his career is over. But it wasn't. The only thing he knew how to do was fight, so he came back and came back and came back.
If he was out of training after a fight, he'd put on tremendous amounts of weight. 30, 40 pounds over what he should be fighting at. And then he'd have to take all that weight off, and, you can't do that to your body time and time again. But, he just kept fighting forever because he needed the money.
In 1983, he beat Davey Moore to recapture his next crown. All of a sudden, Roberto Duran was back, the hero of Latinos everywhere, something he reinforced by beating for his fourth title Iran Barkley in '89. There has never been another boxer who smelled, sounded, sensed, and was the embodiment of the word machismo like Roberto Duran. The hands of stone.